Mabel's hands trembled slightly as she stepped onto the modest stage of the local community hall, her worn shoes tapping softly against the wooden floor. The soft glow of overhead lights bathed the room, spotlighting the woman who appeared older than most of the audience could have guessed. She smoothed the faded shawl draped over her shoulders, gripping the microphone stand as if it were a lifeline. Her heart pounded with a mixture of nerves and determination. This was a moment she had long dreamed of yet feared, sharing her song with a crowd that likely barely knew her. The hall buzzed with quiet chatter as a cluster of faces watched, some curious, others skeptical. At the center of it all was the young host, Derek, a sharp-featured man in his early 30s with a grin that held a trace of condescension. He leaned forward into his microphone, eyes gleaming with the kind of amusement that felt bruising rather than light-hearted. Well, he said, his voice laced with sarcasm, look who's brave enough to step up tonight, Miss Mabel, our very own vintage act. I'm sure we're all eager to hear what classic tune she's got for us. A ripple of laughter broke through the audience. Mabel's cheeks flushed hot with shame and defiance. Derek's gaze was like a sharp blade, cutting through her confidence as the words hung in the air. The unspoken message was clear: she did not belong, her time had passed, and her presence here was a joke. But as Mabel steadied her breath, she knew one thing: she would not be silenced. The night was hers to sing, whether Derek, or anyone else, approved or not. The murmur of laughter that followed Derek's comments settled into a low buzz of amusement and skepticism. Mabel could feel the weight of every gaze directed at her, heavy with judgment. Derek's smirk seemed to grow wider, his eyes sparkling with malicious delight as if he had already claimed victory in this unspoken battle. Well, Miss Mabel, Derek said, his tone dripping with feigned curiosity, I have to wonder, what made you think you belonged on this stage tonight? This isn't exactly your era, is it? We're looking for fresh talent, vibrant voices, not relics. The word relics hung in the air like a slap. The audience chuckled again, some leaning forward with eager anticipation to see how Mabel would respond. She felt an urgent rush of embarrassment, the kind that prickled her skin and threatened to erode the fragile threads of courage she'd woven around her. Her lips parted, but the first words got caught in her throat. Instead, she swallowed hard, steadying her breath, unwilling to let Derek's cruelty steal this moment from her. This was more than just a performance, it was proof that she still belonged somewhere, that her voice still mattered. A few voices from the crowd shifted uneasily. An elderly man in a worn cardigan whispered softly to the woman beside him, "Give her a chance, can't be so quick to judge." But the momentum was with Derek. The laughter came often, a relentless tide that pushed against her resolve. Come on now, Mabel, Derek continued, turning his full attention to the microphone in her hand. If you're not going to sing, we might as well move on to the next act. We've got a schedule to keep. Mabel bit her lip, eyes scanning the room. Faces were no longer just strangers, they were judges, jury, and executioners all at once. She could feel her cheeks burning, her heart throbbing painfully in her chest. Part of her wanted to retreat, to vanish into the shadows backstage where no one could see her trembling. But a deeper voice, one she had cherished through decades, answered in her mind, urging her on. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, Mabel raised the microphone to her lips. Her voice, though fragile at first, carried a quiet strength as she began to sing. The opening notes of an old, beloved ballad filled the room, warm, haunting, and pure. For a moment, the laughter ceased abruptly. There was a collective intake of breath, a reassessment of reality as the raw emotion in her voice began to weave its spell. The familiar melody stirred memories and feelings that transcended age, igniting unseen corners within the crowd's hearts. But Derek wasn't ready to relinquish his hold on the moment. Leaning into his microphone with exaggerated impatience, he muttered under his breath loud enough for several near him to catch, "Still sounds like an old record stuck." The words, intended to sting, instead echoed painfully in the silence that had grown thick between the notes of Mabel's song. She ignored the biting comment, pouring everything she had into the lyrics. The richness of her tone grew stronger with every line, each note imbued with the weight of 1,000 untold stories, sacrifices, joys, heartbreaks, resilience. Slowly, the expressions around her began to shift. The once amused faces softened, eyes glistened with unexpected tears, and some leaned closer as though trying to capture every nuance. An unexpected ripple of warmth spread through the room. People who had moments before been ready to dismiss her found themselves caught in the sincerity of her performance. Even Derek's sarcastic grin now faltered, his confidence giving way to unspoken surprise. Among the audience, a young woman clapped quietly, her eyes shining. An older man dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. A child near the front watched in wide-eyed wonder, captivated not just by the sound but by the dignity of the figure delivering it. As the final note lingered, the silence was profound, an embrace that held Mabel's trembling frame for just a second longer. Then the applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling into genuine, heartfelt appreciation. People rose from their seats, their cheers less about the novelty and more about the authenticity they had witnessed. Derek, previously poised with arrogance, now looked small and uncertain. His gaze flicked away from Mabel, a rare redness tinting his cheeks. The laughter that had followed his mocking words was replaced, awkwardly, uneasily, by murmurs of praise from the crowd. A murmur near the stage caught Mabel's attention. The elderly man in the cardigan whispered again, this time louder, "Now that's a voice worth hearing." The energy in the room shifted palpably, from derision to respect, from ridicule to reverence. Despite the warmth, the moment wasn't free from tension. Derek stepped back into the spotlight, clearing his throat loudly. "Well," he muttered, "I suppose I underestimated you." His voice had lost its usual mock authority, replaced instead by a hint of genuine regret. The audience listened, some nodding slowly, while others exchanged glances. The day's dynamic had flipped. Mabel's heart pounded, not out of fear now, but triumph. The very thing that had made her a target, her age and humble appearance, had been used to dismiss her, yet her voice had pierced through the skepticism and hardened attitudes. She lowered the microphone gently, cheeks still flushed but shining with quiet pride. This was not merely about singing anymore. It was a moment where she reclaimed a part of herself that had long been hidden but never forgotten. Behind the scenes, the cozy community hall seemed bigger now, filled not just with curious strangers but with witnesses to something rare, resilience delivered through song. Before stepping off the stage, she caught a few supportive smiles from faces around the room. The path forward was uncertain, but tonight she had proved something vital. The audience's applause continued, mixing emotion and respect, their earlier amusement replaced by a collective acknowledgement. As she made her way back to the wings, a group of young people gathered near the exit, whispering excitedly about the song, moved by the stark contrast between who they expected and who stood before them. Mabel's legs were weak, but her spirit was firmly grounded. She wondered briefly what Derek might say next, how he would recover from this unexpected twist. But for now, she let the moment linger, a quiet victory over doubt, distraction, and disdain. What would you have done, facing the cruel words and skeptical eyes? Would you have fled or stood your ground, ready to sing your own truth? Mabel took another breath as she stepped back onto the stage, the bright spotlights warming her face and the expectant hush from the audience settling around her uneasily. The heavy silence that had followed the last note was replaced by a cautious curiosity, eyes now riveted not in judgment but wonder. Even Derek, the show's host and relentless skeptic, stood awkwardly by the side, his usually confident posture diminished. She raised the microphone once more, feeling the familiar pulse of music in her veins, a pulse still alive after all these years, dormant but awaiting its moment to roar. This time, she chose a piece different from the wistful ballad that had stunned the crowd earlier. It was more challenging, something she had mastered during her prime, an aria demanding strength, precision, and raw emotion. As she began, her voice soared with unexpected clarity and power, filling every corner of the modest hall. Each note was deliberate and commanding, resonating through the wooden beams and touching every listener in a way that transcended words. The song was a story of hope and redemption, of finding light in darkness, and Mabel's delivery took no prisoners. Every subtle change in pitch, every crescendo and soft diminuendo was a testament to decades of dedication and unyielding passion. The audience remained frozen, mesmerized. Faces that had moments before worn amused expressions were now tear-streaked, eyes glistening with awe. The youngest among them, a boy sitting cross-legged in the front row, looked up at Mabel with wide-eyed admiration, clasping his hands tightly as if holding on to the music itself. In the wings, backstage, the volunteers who helped organize the event had gathered, equally spellbound. One whispered breathlessly, "She wasn't kidding when she said she used to sing professionally. That was incredible." Another nodded, saying, "I never expected. I mean, look at her. The way she controlled every note. It's electric." Even Derek's smug detachment had melted away, replaced by a pained realization. He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Questions flooded his mind. Had he mocked a legend? Was his night of humor turned to his own humiliation? Mabel poured everything into her performance. The years of silence, the nights spent rehearsing alone after family obligations, the quiet sacrifice, all found expression in each phrase. The emotions in her voice were not just technical but deeply personal, a blend of longing, loss, and fierce hope. When she reached the aria's climax, her voice seemed to fill the room with a radiant energy, electrifying the atmosphere, wrapping around every soul in the hall. There were no more whispers, no more stifled giggles, no more spiteful looks. Only pure, shared humanity in that moment, a connection forged by something timeless and powerful. As the final note faded into an almost sacred stillness, Mabel held it just a moment longer before slowly lowering the microphone. The room exploded in applause. It was not polite or perfunctory, it was thunderous, heartfelt, as if the audience could not contain their amazement and gratitude. Some members of the crowd rose to their feet, cheering loudly. Tears flowed freely, and even a few who had earlier sneered seemed unable to resist joining in the ovation, their expressions reflecting awe and newfound respect. Derek, the host, cleared his throat, still flushed. Swallowing his pride, he stepped back into the spotlight. "Ladies and gentlemen," he stammered, voice quieter and devoid of its usual mockery, "I owe Miss Mabel an apology. I underestimated the gift she carries. I was wrong to dismiss her." There was murmured agreement and nods from the crowd, but more than that, it was an unspoken acknowledgement that sometimes the bravest and most remarkable talents are hidden behind appearances and assumptions. Mabel nodded slightly, accepting the gesture with quiet grace, but her mind was already turning to what came next. The performance wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of what she was meant to do. Backstage, a few minutes later, she removed the shawl and smoothed back her silver-gray hair, her pulse finally slowing. Volunteers approached, the young woman from the crowd earlier smiling broadly. "Your voice, it's incredible. Have you thought about teaching? Helping others find their own?" Mabel smiled, a soft glow illuminating her face. "I have," she replied gently. "There's much to share, and so many stories yet to tell." As she gathered her things, the hall around her buzzed with conversation about the evening's unexpected highlight. Whispers of astonishment. Questions about how someone so seemingly plain could carry such brilliance within. The shift was unmistakable. Attitudes had changed not through confrontation or argument but through the undeniable power of art. Even Derek stood apart, wrestling with his own feelings. His earlier arrogance had been shattered, replaced by respect tinged with regret. He mumbled to a nearby colleague, "I should have known better." Sometimes the quietest people have the loudest voices. Mabel's song had done more than turn the tide of opinion, it had unsettled assumptions and shattered stereotypes. She realized something crucial: her voice was not just about notes or songs. It was about reclaiming identity and dignity wrapped in melody. She had survived years of silence and obscurity, and now she was ready to share that light openly. The crowd, originally poised to dismiss her, was now buzzing with admiration and surprise, a transformation that few expected or could easily forget. From the back of the room, a teenager shouted, "Encore! Encore!" and the ripple of agreement grew. Mabel chuckled softly to herself, a deep satisfaction radiating through her. It was a moment she might have feared before but now welcomed fully. She looked toward Derek once again. He gave a small, reluctant nod, silently inviting her to continue. It wasn't the same stage anymore, it was hers. In that instant, she felt seen, not just as an old woman stepping out of time, but as the artist she had always been, unbroken and brilliant. As she raised the microphone for the encore, the room leaned in closer, ready for the music to carry them somewhere beyond the judgments and the mockery, to a place where heart and voice intertwined. And so, Mabel sang again, this time, with the smile of someone who knew exactly who she was, and the power music held to change everything. After the last note of her encore faded, the room remained wrapped in a reverent silence before the applause rose anew, this time more intimate, more understanding. As Mabel stepped away from the microphone and toward the side of the stage, murmurs blossomed into conversations, many seeking to know more about the woman who had so unexpectedly captivated them. In the quiet backstage area, a few curious faces gathered, their questions tentative but eager. It was then that a friend stepped forward, gently placing a hand on Mabel's arm and beginning to unfold a story few had guessed, one that added new layers of depth beneath the surface of the evening's surprise. "Mabel," the friend said softly, "you should tell them who you really are." Mabel looked at the group assembled and nodded, a little smile tracing her lips. Once a woman of a grander stage, she chose to share more than the voice that had enchanted them. She let the veil of time lift, revealing the life she had carefully tucked away. "I used to sing opera," she confessed, her voice full of warmth and gentle nostalgia. "Not just here or there, a well-known company overseas. I was fortunate, in a way. My voice carried me across grand halls filled with eager audiences." She paused, eyes glinting with the memories. "But life has its own songs, doesn't it? When my husband fell ill, I left it all. Touring, performances, I set them aside to care for him, to raise our children, and later to volunteer in local shelters and communities." The crowd listened silently, absorbing the tale of a woman who had exchanged limelight for love and service, whose modest appearance reflected decades of journeys far beyond the stage. Mabel's simple shawl and worn shoes belonged not to a woman who lacked grandeur, but to one who chose humility over fame. A young woman stepped closer. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why come here dressed so plainly?" Mabel looked toward the floor briefly before answering. "Because this wasn't about titles or the past. I wanted to sing again for myself, and for those who need to hear that courage never fades. It's about connection, heart to heart, beyond the surface." The clarity in her words drew a respectful silence. The stories people tell and the ones they hold inside sometimes differ, and tonight, Mabel had shared both. Throughout the hall, whispers circulated. The host, Derek, now standing apart from the crowd, observed thoughtfully. His earlier brashness had softened. Witnessing Mabel's grace and humility made him reconsider not just a single night but the ease with which people are judged superficially. Behind that cool exterior was a man quietly wrestling with his own preconceptions, learning how appearances could deceive and how courage could lie hidden beneath unassuming forms. Others in the audience connected pieces too, recognizing a humble strength honed by years of sacrifice rather than spotlight. This wasn't a comeback born of vanity, but a rekindling ignited by years of quiet resilience. People began to approach Mabel with genuine admiration not only for her voice but for the woman she was, the woman who had weathered life's storms with grace, who had chosen love and service over fame. In this small community hall, she now shone not as a distant star but as a warmly glowing light. A local community leader stepped forward, a smile bright and sincere. "Mabel, our center could use someone just like you. Your voice, your story, stories like yours inspire others, especially young people looking for hope and strength. Have you considered teaching here?" Mabel's eyes softened at the invitation, a tender acknowledgement of the place she had returned to, not just as a performer but as a mentor and companion in the lives of others. "I would like that very much," she replied. "If my experiences can give others the courage to find their voices, then it will be worth sharing." As the evening wound down and the crowd dispersed with lingering smiles and newfound respect, Mabel felt a quiet fulfillment settle deep within her chest. The simple shawl she wore no longer felt like a shield hiding frailty but a gentle cloak of dignity she was ready to embrace openly. She thought back to the years of waiting, of quiet nurturing behind closed doors and the long ache of silence. Tonight had been a revelation, not a revival of past fame, but a celebration of what had always been there, the enduring spirit of a woman who never stopped singing, even in the softest moments. Derek approached last, hesitance marking each step. When he spoke, his tone was humbled but sincere. "Mabel," he said, "I was wrong. Tonight, you taught me something I won't soon forget. Thank you for sharing your gift, your truth." Mabel smiled gently, a warmth passing between them. "Thank you for listening." The encounter felt like a quiet truce between two very different worlds, one that had begun in derision but had ended in respect, a reminder that understanding grows when courage meets compassion. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave the community hall, Mabel glanced back at the stage where just hours before she had felt diminutive and out of place. Now, it gleamed not just with light but with possibility. Her simple shoes had carried her across that threshold into a new chapter, one where her voice and story would inspire more than she ever dared hope. What unfolded beyond the applause was a gentle unfolding of hearts and minds, proof that sometimes the most powerful journeys begin with a single note, a single song, and an old woman brave enough to sing it. And amidst it all, Mabel's spirit shimmered quietly, a reminder that true strength is found not in fame or outward trappings but in the quiet grace of lived experience and enduring hope. In the days that followed her unexpected triumph, the atmosphere in the community shifted noticeably. News of Mabel's performance, once considered merely a quaint curiosity, spread like wildfire, capturing hearts far beyond the small hall where it had all taken place. People who had initially scoffed now spoke in whispers of amazement and respect, grateful for the reminder that talent and spirit could never be measured by appearance alone. Derek, the young host whose earlier arrogance had fueled the night's conflict, found himself at the center of a quiet reckoning. Conversations circulated about his mocking behavior, not only with those directly involved but also within the broader community. His judgmental comments became a topic of gentle censure. The management of the talent show recognized that by belittling Mabel, he had undermined the very values they wanted to promote: respect, inclusion, and encouragement. After much discussion, Derek was approached by the organizing committee. They expressed their disappointment in his conduct and made it clear that such dismissiveness had no place on their platform. Reluctantly, and with a humility born from genuine reflection, Derek accepted the need for change. He was asked to step down as host for the upcoming season, an outcome that saddened him but also pushed him to consider his own attitudes and biases. In a personal gesture, Derek arranged to meet Mabel to apologize face-to-face. The meeting was quiet but sincere. He admitted his misjudgments and acknowledged the depth of wisdom and talent he had failed to see. Mabel listened without anger, understanding that his apology was not only for her but for the lessons he needed to learn. They parted with a handshake that symbolized growth and forgiveness. Meanwhile, Mabel's life blossomed into a beautiful new chapter. Invitations came flooding in, not just to perform, but to share her experiences and teach others. At the local community center, she accepted a role as a vocal instructor, eager to nurture budding singers and instill confidence in all who crossed her path. The simple room filled with laughter and music became her second home, a place where every voice was valued, regardless of age or background. Mabel's humility remained intact even as admiration surrounded her. When asked about her newfound recognition, she often deflected praise, focusing instead on the power of perseverance and the importance of kindness. Each of us bears a song inside, she would say softly, and sometimes it just needs the courage to be heard. Her presence in the community inspired others to look beyond surface appearances, fostering a spirit of acceptance and empathy. The walls that once divided young and old, seasoned and novice, began to crumble under the weight of shared stories and music. For Mabel, the journey was not just a personal victory but a testament to resilience and the transformative nature of art. She no longer walked the stage alone, she carried with her the hopes and voices of many, a living reminder that no matter the years or the doubts, each person's true worth is immeasurable. On a sunny afternoon, just weeks after her debut at the talent show, Mabel stood before a new class of eager pupils. Her eyes shone with quiet pride as she guided them through scales and melodies, the room alive with potential. Suddenly, a gentle knock announced a visitor. It was Derek, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers and a humble smile. "I hope you don't mind," he said, "but I wanted to thank you again. What you shared that night changed me, and I thought these might brighten your day." Mabel accepted the flowers graciously, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Derek. Change is a song we all must learn to sing." They shared a warm moment, proof that even the sharpest edges could soften with a little understanding and grace. As the sun set over the town, Mabel felt a deep sense of peace. Her journey from mocked outsider to cherished mentor was far from over, but the path ahead now shimmered with promise. Her story had become a melody echoing in countless hearts, reminding everyone that sometimes, the quietest voices hold the greatest power. If you found Mabel's story moving, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt tales. And we'd love to hear from you. What would you have done in Mabel's place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in our next story.